Well, memory and thinking skills naturally slow with age, but now scientists are peeking inside of living brains to tell if depression might worsen that decline, and they're finding some worrisome clues. Joining us now to talk more about this is Leigh Richardson. She is a licensed professional counselor and the founder of the Brain Performance Center in DFW. Leigh, thank you for joining us. Tell us, what are researchers discovering?
What they're discovering is that for the first time we're being able to look at live brains, and they're looking at brains of people of all ages. It's not just old people, but people with depression are starting to experience more cognitive difficulties. And in a lot of ways, that makes sense to me, because when you think about it, if you're depressed, then, you can't get to the gym, you quit exercising, maybe you quit making as good of food choices. So you're changing your body on a physiological level, and that's changing the brain too. So a lot of what we do when we're depressed almost accelerates the normal aging process.
Is there an age limit or a point when this starts, or are you finding that this may be beginning in people really much younger than anticipated?
Well, we know that as we age, the brain changes. The sad part is that the brain's not fully developed, those frontal lobes, until mid to late 20s. Then you reach 40 and it starts to plateau. So there are some normal changes going on. But what they're finding is that people with depression, they're seeing more things like the size of the brain regions can actually decrease. They can shrink. I think some studies have noted that in the amygdala and in the prefrontal cortex, and that's the part of the brain that controls emotional responses. That's the part of the brain that recognizes those social cues. And they're seeing shrinkage in those parts of the brain.
So it's really like a vicious cycle, it seems like.
Well, there's to me, depression is dysregulation in the brain. And brain waves are just as genetic as anything else. So genetics comes into play. Anytime you hit your head, physical head trauma, that changes the way those neurons and dendrites are creating those synapses. And anytime you go through emotional trauma, that changes everything about the brain. And those things, when you look at people that are severely depressed, most of them can usually, if not check all three, they can check at least two of those boxes.
And what are the implications of this when it comes to possibly developing Alzheimer's?
Well, they're finding more and more, one of the things that they're linking towards that is lack of sleep. Because in people with depression, now they may use sleep as a coping skill and sleep too much. But people that the only time that your brain can have these little glial cells come out and clean up all that toxic waste from the way those neurons and dendrites are creating those synapses is when you're asleep. And if you're not getting enough sleep, they're finding that leads more to the Alzheimer's disease.
So what should people do if they're listening and they think they might be suffering from depression or know someone who is? What should they do?
Reach out for help. 10 years ago, people would come into my clinic and they would kind of dance around the fact that maybe they were depressed or anxious. Now people are more open and willing to understand that mental health is just the same as physical health. And if you're starting to experience some of that depression or anxiety, or you're having trouble with memory, reach out for help.
All right. Thank you so much. That is Leigh Richardson. She is the founder of the Brain Performance Center in DFW.